So today, hello everyone. In this lecture, you are going to learn Spring Boot with JPA plus MySQL. So far we have created projects like let me show you one by one. So in Spring application, right? Spring Boot application or Java, if you want to if you want to save the data in database, Java or Spring Framework is having four layers actually. In four layers, we based on the four layers, we can perform database operations. What are those four layers? Let me explain you one by one. JDBC. So one layer is JDBC. Another one is JDBC template, and another layer is another layer is JPA, and fourth one Spring Data JPA. So here in these four layers. So total by using these four layers, we can perform database operations in Java or Spring application. So in Java, in plain advanced Java, so we used to use JDBC concept to persist the data. So after the JDBC, so once Spring came into picture, so they have enhanced with the JDBC template. So JDBC template is having abstraction on JDBC. So JDBC template internally it uses JDBC only. Okay, so we have created a project with JDBC template, right? So after that, so after the JDBC template, so again JPA came into picture. So JPA is nothing but, so here yesterday we have used, right, entity manager. So using JPA, so we can persist the data with the help of entity manager. So this is another layer of database layer to persist the data in database. So now what is the fourth one? Spring Data JPA. So here repository. So here we are going to persist the data with the help of repository. In third layer, we are going to persist the data in entity manager. In second layer, we are going to persist the data using JDBC template. In first layer, JDBC. These are all the four operations. By using these four operations, we are going to perform code operations in database, any database. So far, so we have done JDBC template and entity manager, and now we are going to we are going to process the data with the help of repository. So you have to understand what are these four, what is the difference. So JDBC is nothing but, so there we have to create the connection object and statement object and prepared statement and a lot of code we have to write. So that is optimized in JDBC template. So with the help of JDBC template, so we no need to create the connection object, and we no need to create the statements and prepared statements, right? So that code is optimized in JDBC template. So JDBC template internally it uses JDBC only, so it has abstraction on JDBC. Now come to JDBC template, so we no need to create connection objects and statements and prepared statements. So now let's slowly again JPA came into picture. JPA in the sense ORM software. So ORM software, object relational mapping, we already discussed, right? So Java persistence API. So here entity manager, this is another layer to perform database operations, which is available in only JPA. So they after that, so it has a entity manager is having abstraction on persistence context actually. So now fourth one is Spring Data JPA. This is another dependency which is introduced by Spring Boot. So here we are going to perform database operations with the help of repository. So this is repository is having abstraction on entity manager. So entity manager is optimized as repository. So here we no need to define at the rate transactional annotation, and and we know different so many user defined methods are there. So it is very flexible to perform database operations with repository. So I will create one project with repository. Okay, so this is the difference between these four layers. Okay, so again I am explaining you. So first JDBC came into picture. After that, so it was optimized to JDBC templates. After that, JPA came into picture to avoid database dependency. So JDBC template is having database dependent, right? So we used to write the queries and all. So where JPA came into picture, we no need to write the queries. So Hibernate will create, JPA will create, Hibernate or JPA will create uh, SQL statements for us. So this is object relational mapping. So uh, another implementation for to perform database operations. So again, fourth one, still again one more, they are optimized the code with the help of performing database operations with repository, Spring Data repository. Okay, so these four, by using these four layers, we can perform database operations. Okay, so now in this lecture, we are going to create Spring Boot with JPA plus MySQL. Okay, so let's start now. Open browser, and then here we can go to start.spring.io, Spring Initializer, right? So we can create project from Spring Initializer. I'm going to create a Maven project, and then let it select latest version, Spring Boot latest version 3.1.5, and project metadata. So let me give project level package. So com dot spring boot dot mysql. Okay, or under jpa dot. So this is the our root package of application. Now I will give project name as Spring Boot Data JPA with MySQL. Okay. So now here this much big package I don't want. I will remove this. That's it. So now my sort is saying error. So let me create. Uh, or let it be as is. So let me create using a JDK 17. So here we will select JDK 17 because all three Spring Boot 3.0 onwards, it will support JDK 17 and JDK 21. So I will go with JDK 17. So let me add dependencies. So to create REST APIs, we need to add web module, Spring web module. So now we need to add JPA, Spring Data JPA. So we need to add another dependency. We are going to connect with MySQL database. So you can add MySQL driver. So after that, so I will add another one, Spring DevTools. So Spring DevTools, this is for without restarting the server, our changes will reflect in Tomcat server, right? So I will add this dependency as well. So total we have Spring Web and Spring Data JPA and MySQL driver and Spring Boot DevTools. So let me add H2 database as well. So now let me generate the project. So project is generated. So let me copy the project and extract into any folder, any one of the folder. I'm going to extract in C drive, spring underscore applications. So you can extract the project file, any of the directory. Okay. So now extract it here. So my project is extracted. I am copying project path. Now we can open Eclipse. So here we can import the project. Go to file, you can see import option. So here you can select existing Maven projects and then you can give the project path which we have downloaded from the Spring Initializer. So now click on finish button. So project is imported successfully. If you open pom.xml, you can see we have Spring Dev Tools, Spring Web, Spring Starter JPA, Data JPA, and H2 in memory database and MySQL driver. So currently we are going to connect with MySQL server, right? So you may have doubt, right? Actually, so sir, why we added H2 in memory database? Actually, this is not needed. The purpose why I have added, let me explain you. So if you delete this dependency, H2 in memory dependency, so after that, so let me start the Spring Boot application. From where we can start Spring Boot application? This is our entry point, right? So from here we can start our Spring Boot application. Right click and run as Java application. So if you see, the moment I start the server, you can see our server is not started successfully. Why? It is expecting JDBC URL and driver class, JDBC URL and driver class. So whenever you are importing projects from the, whenever you are trying to connect with any specific database, whenever you are adding Spring Data JPA dependency, so Spring container will expect data source. So by default, MySQL username and password, our application will not have MySQL username and driver class name details and username and password, right? So that's why when server startup, so it will fail because of it is looking for MySQL driver and username and password to connect with MySQL database, because in pom.xml we have added MySQL driver, right, MySQL connector, right? So it is trying to connect with MySQL. So since our project is not having MySQL connection details, so that's the reason our application will not start successfully. So if you add Spring H2 in-memory database, now you can see. Let me start the server again. If you start the server, you can see our server started successfully without any errors, because H2 in-memory database by default it will enable in Spring Boot application. H2 in-memory database by default, the data source which is available for H2 in-memory database, Spring Boot will provide by default. So that is the reason I have added Spring so H2 in-memory database. So for us, as of now, this is not needed. To make you understand, I just added by default. Okay, so now this is not at all needed for us. We can remove it. Okay, so let me stop the server. So now what is if you remove this, what will happen? Let me. So before removing, I want to show you in-depth concepts of H2 in-memory database. How H2 in-memory database is enabled by default in Spring Boot application. So let me explain you that. So how Spring Boot is enabling H2 in-memory database by default. So let me open the resources folder. In resources folder, there is application properties, right? So let me enable debug. Let me debug the code. Okay. Logging dot level dot root. Root is equal to debug. So we can debug root level. So root level in the sense everything, all the packages, all the libraries which are we have added in our project, right? In Spring Web or Spring Framework or Hibernate, everything. So logging dot level dot root property is equal to debug. The moment you specify this property in application dot properties, so we can debug entire application what is happening in background. Okay, so now let me start the application. So you can see there is number of logs are shown here. So the moment you start the server, these many operations are happening. So for the now I am going to show you how Spring Boot application is enabling H2 in-memory database by default. So how we can do? So you can click on the console. Now open Control F and search for H2 console. If you search for H2 console, you can see there is a H2 console auto configuration. You can see, right? So based on the H2 console auto configuration class, so Spring Boot is enabling by default H2 in-memory database. You can see there is a property we have already discussed in previous lectures, right? So how we can enable or disable H2 in-memory database with the help of Spring dot h2 dot console dot enable is equal true. So if you make it as a false, so you can disable h2 in memory database. If it is declare it as a true, so h2 console will be enabled. So with whenever you are adding h2 in memory database dependency in pom.xml, so by default Spring Boot will enable data source for H2 console based on H2 console auto configuration. So this is most important in-depth concept, guys. You have to remember how Spring Boot enabled H2 console by default with the help of H2 console auto configuration class based on the property spring.h2.console.enabled equal true. So this is enabled by default in Spring Boot application. So you got it right. So similarly, you can check JDBC. You can see JDBC template also. If you want to work with JDBC template, there is a JDBC template auto configuration. So here also JDBC auto configuration, the data source is enabled. You can see based on the data source, JDBC template auto configured by default by Spring Boot. So with the help of Spring Boot, right? So like this, it is enabled by default in Spring Boot application. So now we are currently we are going to connect with MySQL database, right? So I don't want to connect with HD in memory database. Now we no need to have this dependency. So I am removing this dependency, H2 in memory database dependency. So once you remove the dependency, so your application will not start successfully. Your application will have errors. So let me open the console. If you see, the moment you remove that HTTP memory database, so we are getting the error. Database already closed. So closed and it is unable to open the data source actually. So to check actual error, let me stop the server, because the moment you remove the dependency, whenever there is a changes in pom.xml, you should always update your project. Right click on the project, go to Maven and click on update project. Whenever there is a changes in pom.xml, make sure you are always updating the project. Otherwise, those changes it will misguide you actually. Okay. So now let me start the server. Now I have removed the H2 in memory database dependency. Now I started the server. So now you can see there is a error in the console because So our application is trying to connect with MySQL database, so it is not able to identify the MySQL database because there is no connection details available in our application. You can see failed to determine suitable driver, failed to determine suitable driver, and URL and username. You can see there is a, it will clearly says URL. You can see failed to configure data source. So by default, Spring Boot application will not enable data source for MySQL. So now we have to configure data source. Where we need to configure, already you know, you are aware of it. In previous lectures, I already explained you. So where we have to enable in application.properties, what we have to write, Spring dot data source dot URL is equal. So what is the URL to connect for MySQL database? ADBC colon MySQL colon slash slash local host colon 3306 slash, you have to give your database name. So let me open my SQL client. So here, so you already knows, right, how we have installed these softwares. You can check previous lectures. So employee DB. So we have employee database. So we are going to connect with employee DB. So employee DB. Save this. So now next what we need, Spring dot data source dot username. Root is the username in my machine. So now Spring dot data source dot password. So to connect with any database in Spring Boot, we need these three properties. Any database, if you want to connect with Spring or Spring Boot application, so we need to have these three properties. Then only you can connect with any database based on the dependency which you have added in pom.xml. So now let me start the application. Fail to configure your why still attribute is not specified. So let me check. JDBC colon MySQL colon localhost colon 3306. See here I have given spell mistake. You can see there is a spell mistake in the property. That is the reason and this URL is not able to recognize. So let me correct it. Spring dot data source dot URL. Let me save the properties file. Now you can start the server. She still failed to configure database URL. Embedded data source could be configured. So it is still it is expecting H2 console. You can see, consider the following H2 or Derby. You can see, right? So still it is trying to connect H2 in-memory database, not MySQL, right? So why? Because we have to disable that. So I already shown you earlier, right? So when you log in here, so in a Spring Boot application by default H2 console is enabled, right? So we need to disable that property. How we can disable that property? Spring dot H2 dot console dot enabled equal false. This Spring dot H2 dot console dot enabled equal to false. Now root and admin, root is the username and admin is the password. So let me check whether I have configured proper DB employee DB. Yes, correct. So let me, so there is a database created, employee database. So now let me start the application. Still it is expecting URL. So let me update the project. Right click on the project and move in and update project. So now let me start the application. So and still it is looking for embedded database, H2 in-memory database. If you have database settings to be loaded from the particular profile, you may need to activate it. No profiles are currently active. Okay, so by default, actually, it is not activating the uh, SQL database. So let me add H2 in-memory database. Without that, it is not allowing to connect MySQL database. Let me update the project again. Move update project. Click on force update and OK. Now again, let me start the server. So now server started successfully. So now our server is started successfully. So it is always expecting H2 in-memory database. Okay, let it be as of now. So now let me create the repository layer. So what we have to do now, we are going to connect with MySQL database with JPA with the help of repository layer. You can see with the help of repository layer. So now, so before that, so let me create the controller package. Right click on the root package of our project and then click on uh, package name. So select the package. So let me create controller package. Created. So now we need to create the controller class employee rest controller. So to make you clear understand employee rest controller, let me finish. So you need to declare at the rate rest controller annotation to become your class as a rest controller. That's it. So this is the first step. After that, so we need a model object, right? So if you want to perform database operations, we have to create model object. So let me create the model object. Other and then create class employee. Click on finish button. So now employee will have private integer ID, employee ID. Next, private string first name. Similarly, last name and email. Mobile number. So let's say we have one, two, three, four, five properties. Okay. So we need to create generate setters and getter methods. Right click on the project. Sorry, right click on the class and source. You can use select all and then generate setters and getter methods. So we need to override toString method as well. Done. Our model object is ready. So now our controller is ready. Now our model object also ready. So now what we have to do, we have to create the API. Public. We'll create a find employees. Okay. So find employee will always return employee object. So now this should return employee object, right? So as of now, I will do return null. So since we have not created a service class object, right? So find employee method should be get mapping. So employee object, we need to organize the imports. So that's it. So now why I have written first controller. So after writing the controller, right? So find employee method. So if you want to find the employee, we need to get the employee ID, right, to find the employee. So let me get it from the this time I want to send employee ID from post request. Let me create post request. I am sending employee ID from the post request. So how we can send at the rate request body, and then you have to pass employee objects. As part of employee model object only, I want to pass employee ID. Okay. So now uh, whenever you are sending the data as part of post request, right? So I want to debug this information. So whenever you are sending request from the REST clients, so I want to capture that request. So far we haven't captured the request. So how it is looks like, right? So let me capture the request now. So I am teaching you in depth, guys. You should concentrate. Okay. So we are going to before inserting the data. Now we are going to capture the request. Okay. So how we can capture the request, I am going to show you. So let me open the browser, and you have to test your API from Talent API tester. So what is the API name? So we have not given the API name, right? So let me create the API name. So here I will give find employee. Find employee is the API, right? So let me invoke this API, and I'm clearing the console. So I have cleared the console. So now we are going to debug the code in depth actually. So how we can capture the request from the REST clients. So now let me go to the browser. From here you can call find employee API. So what is the request method? It is post request method. I'm sending employee ID as part of request body. So here I am going to give ID. So as of now I am giving 1 comma. Okay. So now let me send the request. So let me clear the console before that. So there is nothing available in the console. I just clear the log. Now send the request. So we got the response, right? Our request went successfully. So what 200 nothing but request went to the server and response came back to the client. Okay, 200 indicates that your request successfully processed. So now let me go to the console. You can see, if you see in the console, you can see there is a request received from the client. You can see all the request information here, guys. You can see all the request information. So what is the request I have sent? So I sent employee ID Sachin Virendra Chevak, so something like that. So to search the employee, we do not need this information actually. So I don't want to pass this also. Let's assume I don't want to pass this also. So even if you pass, you can see in the console, there is a request is coming. You can see there is a log request, what type of request it is. So whenever, if you want to debug your request information in the server, what kind of request came into your server, so you can debug in depth based on the property which we have enabled in application dot properties. What is that? Root logger. We have enabled root package of the application. So we have enabled root equal to debug. So logging dot level dot root equal debug. So this property will enable to debug all the packages which are packages in the nothing but the dependencies you can see. So there is a Maven dependencies, right? If you open, so there is a number of libraries, there is a number of dependence jars are available, right? So all the jars related packages, so information, debug related information will display in console. So now what we are trying to debug, so we are trying to capture the request from the REST client in our server. So now the moment I send the request, you can see there is a request is printed in the console. Received post request, and it is a HTTP request. What is the URL? Find employee is the API. And what is the port number? 8080. Connection keep alive. Content length and request ID is generated. And what is it will accept application or JSON, content type application or JSON. You can see from where we send this. Go to your browser. We have by default we have selected, right, accept application or JSON and content type application or JSON. This information also we are able to capture in the console. Similarly, so from which browser, you can see from which browser request came. So request came from Chrome browser. So I have sent request from Chrome browser, right? So it is, our server is displaying Chrome information also. So and it will accept to Mozilla and Chrome. You can see different kinds of Windows environment user agent. And next, what is the platform? It is Windows platform. So from this, I sent request from Windows platform only, right? So this is, that is the information. That is the information. So this you can ignore as of now. I will explain you later. So this course and all I will explain you later. So now we can see accept language, and by default something, some local is printed, and accept languages are US. You can see accept language is US, and our request clearly displayed in console. This is how we can capture the console. What is the advantage of this? Let's say your application is deployed in your server, okay, in the production or somewhere something else. So if you want to capture, if you want to check what kind of request came into server, what you can debug based on the log which is displayed in the console. So this is the request is logged in the console. So now this is how you can debug internally. You can see post request find employee. So after that is opening JPA entity manager, and then you can see connection is established. Connection is established. Okay, and also you can see all the URLs which are available in currently. This is the only API we have, right, in our controller. This is the only API we have. Let's say if you have 10 controllers, so if you have 10 controllers, all the API URIs also we can see by enabling that debug logs. Okay, so now you got to know how to capture the request from the server. Okay, so now there is another way also there. How we can do? There is a logging mechanism, logging framework that I will explain you later. So as of now, you can learn. This is another. This is one way to capture your request details. Okay, so now our controller is ready. So now as of now I want to next step. What we need to do, let me open the PDF. So during the Spring Boot architecture we have created controller. So now we have to create service layer. So let me create the service layer. So I will create little bit fast. Okay, so let me create service other, let me create interface employee service. Okay, so here I will create uh, employee find by employee method. So what it will expect? It will expect only ID, right? Integer ID. That's it. So now I will write as of now, let it be find by employee. Okay. So now let me create another method, employee create employee. So it will have employee information. So now create employee. So as of now, let it these two methods. Okay. So now let me go and create implementation class. So how we can create the implementation class? So right click on the service package controller. Oh, I haven't created the service packages. Okay, let me copy this. So it is better always create packages, guys. You should create the package. Okay, you should not create everything inside that. Okay, new, create other, and package service package, finish. So inside that you can create interface, employee service, finish. Okay, so I already copied. So or let me write. Okay, uh, employee find by employee, and it will have integer id. So input, right? So if you want to search the employee, we need to have id as input. So now if you want to save the employee, so we need to have create employee method. So if you want to create the employee, we need to pass employee information, right? So this method should have employee. Okay, as of now, let it be these two methods. So now let me create implementation. Right click and others. So implementation in the sense you have to create the class. In previous lectures, I already clearly explained you guys. Okay, so now here employee service IMPL. So it will extend what it will extend? It will extend employee service. Click OK. Now click finish button. So that's it. So whatever methods we have written in interface, those are overridden by default. So now from the service we have created. After service, what we need? We need to create repository. So now let me create repository package. So inside the repository package, we need to create class. So now we are going to, as discussed earlier, so what we are going to implement with the help of Spring Data JPA with the help of repository. Earlier we have worked with entity manager. So now we are going to work with repository. So JPA repository. So now let me create the class employee repository class. Employee repository. So we are going to implement with JPA repository, right? There is a class, super class is available. You can just need to browse it here. You can just type JPA repository. It should have JPA repository. Sorry, it should have, it is interface actually. You can see JPA repository. JPA repository is a interface. So that's the reason we have to click. You can see if you want to extend the class, you have to click this browse button. If you want to implement the interface, you have to click add button. Since JPA repository is a interface, so you have to implement it. JPA repository. That's it. Now click on finish button. Click on finish button. So your employee repository is ready now. So why it is giving error? So JPA repository is, you will expect two arguments. It is generic type. JPA repository is having generic type. What is that one? One is your entity class object, employee entity. And what is the primary key? I have given integer, right? So integer. So you should give wrapper type, guys. Okay. We have to create it as a interface, because since it is a, interface, we need to create the class actually. So let me create the interface and then extend the JPA repository. So this is not a way to create it actually. So let me delete it. It is clearly giving the error. Why? Because we should create the interface, employee repository. Okay. So now you can see JPA, you can extend the JPA repository. This is how we have to create the repository, guys. Okay, so now click on finish button. So you have to create the JPA employee repository class and as an interface, and then you have to extend the JPA repository. So now here, what is the generic type? So we are going to insert the employee, right? So employee information is the ID first argument. So now second one should be in your primary key. If you based on the in an employee, if you give long, you have to specify long. If you give integer, you have to specify integer. You should give always wrapper type, not primitive type. So if you assume, if you should be wrapper type, so integer. That's it, our repository is ready now. So now we can call this repository from service layer. So go to your service layer, employee service IMPL. So how we can create the service repository objects? So private employee repository. You just need to create the instance of employee repository. So now who will create the object for employee repository? Let me stop the server. Every time it is stopping, right? So let me stop the server. After completing all the code changes, we can start the server. Okay. So who will create our employee repository object? So our employee repository object will create by Spring container. So let me give at the rate auto void. So the moment we declare auto void, Spring container will create our employee repository. That's it, guys. That's it. Very, very easy. Now we can call all the methods. So here find by employee. So what we need to do? Employee repository dot find. You can see there is set of method, there is a find by id method. So employee repository is having find by API method. Just you need to pass employee id, and what it is saying, so it will return the optional of employee. It will return optional of employee. So that time we have to access the get method. So that's it, dot get method, it will return optional of employee object. Okay, that's it. So now next, so to create the employee, also very, very easy. What we have to do, employee repository dot, there is a method, save method. You can see there is a method available in employee repository object, save. So this method will perform insert or update operation, guys. Okay. So here you need to pass employee object. So before that, so you have to make it your model object as a entity, because we are working with JPAs, right? We are going to perform with JPA, Java Persistence APIs. How you can perform database operations with the help of entities. So you have to declare your model class as entity. How we can declare? At the rate entity. So at the rate is not typing in my machine. So what I will do, let me copy that. So you have to declare your Pojo class as entity. So at the rate, how we can declare? At the rate entity annotation Jakarta dot persistence. Earlier it is having in Java X dot persistence package. So now they are moved to Jakarta dot persistence dot entity. Okay. So now your class become as a entity. So the moment you declare the entity, so we should define the primary key, right? So how we can define the primary key? We already discussed, guys. So at the rate id, so the moment you declared at the rate id annotation, so this id will become as a primary key of employee. So remaining, so columns I don't want to specify, so let me as of now. So now who is going to create the database table? So as of now, let me start the server. You can check what will happen now. So this employee object we need to call in the controller, right? So we have created, but we have not calling that. So what you have to do here, from the controller, go to your architecture. So from the controller, we have to call service. From service, we have to call repository. We already called repository from service, right? So now we have to call service layer from controller. So to call service layer, we need a service class object, right? So let me create private employee service interface. You have to create instance of employee service, and then we have to declare it as a auto wire annotation. That's it. Spring Boot will create one singleton object. One singleton shared object will created by Spring container. The moment you declare it as a at the rate auto wire annotation. So this is a what kind of injection? Field level injection. What kind of injection? So we have a three types of injections: constructor injection, setter injection, and field level injection. So this is called as field level injection, dependency injection, field level. So now let me call employee service dot find employee. So what we need to pass? It is expecting integer, right? So integer id we need to pass. So how we can pass? Employee dot get id. That's it. So find employee is ready now. So let me create another API. Create employee. Very easy, guys. You just need to practice. That's it. Create employee. So create employee also need input employee. So now we can call, what is the method? In service class we have what are all the methods we have written? You can see control space, service dot control space. If you do, you can see all the available methods. So create employee, there is a employee method we have written in service class, create employee. So what we need to pass? Employee object. That's it. So two APIs are ready. But if you see, go to in our database, so we haven't created the table. So we haven't created the table. So now actually, so in Spring Boot, when you are using JPA, when you are working with MySQL, so generally we can create a table dynamically with the help of one property. I will explain you later. Let me start the server. There is no table available in database as of now. Okay. So now server is started. So you can see what it is saying. It is throwing exception. Why? Because no qualifier being employee service. No qualifier being employee service dependency annotation. So are require auto it is not auto. No such definition been employee service. Why? Let me go to employee service. So whenever exception comes, you should feel very happy, guys. So employee service IMPL employee service. So here right. So what we have to do? So our class, if you want to become a class as a service, we have to define at the rate we have to define at the rate, right? So at the rate component, declare it as a component annotation. So then only our Spring container will create the object of employee service, right? So during the service creation, we have not added at the rate component annotation. That is the reason Spring container is not able to create the uh, bean for employee service. It is clearly saying no qualifier bean. Okay, so now let me start the server again. Yeah, now your server started successfully. There is no uh, errors. You can see here our application is connected with which database. Let me check. So it should connect with the MySQL database. So as of now, let me check. Uh, to check that one, as of now, just type MySQL database. Just search for MySQL in the console. So I want to show you our application is connected with the MySQL database or not. You can do another way. So what you can do, you can just go to your properties file. For the time being, what I will do, go to your application.properties.xml. So sorry, properties file. I want to disable this as of now. Let me remove this as of now. Okay. Save. So now let me, so it will have limited logs, right? So we can clearly see the logs. Let me start the server. Yeah, so now you can see, right? So here, which database it is connected. So still it is trying to connect H2 in-memory database. Because of that, we are not able to find MySQL database. What is the reason? So let me check. So go to here, H2 in-memory database. Let me check in pom.xml. We have added proper MySQL driver, guys. Let me check. Go to pom.xml. MySQL runtime. So it should work actually. So it is not connecting. So what I will do, let me add another dependency. This dependency is not working. Let me try. So from where we can copy the dependency, Maven repo, right? So Maven repo. So go to Maven repo, MySQL dependency. Copy the latest version of MySQL connector. Okay. So go to your pom.xml and add the dependency. Control Shift F. So let me start the server. So let me remove H2 in-memory database. What will happen? We'll see. Now you can see our application. So let me update the project. So it is misguiding us actually. So what you can do, stop the server. So whenever there is a changes in pom.xml, so what we can do, we can update the project. So right click on the project and go to Maven and update the projects. You have to practice like this, guys. Do one by one. So whenever there is exceptions or something like that, you have to find out the issue. Okay. So now it is updated, right? So let me start the server again. failed to configure data source URL. So attribute is not specified and no embedded data source could be configured. So why? So let me go to application.properties. So this is on Spring SPRI and Spring data. So you can see here, guys. So there is a spell mistake I have given. There is a spell mistake instead of data source. What I have given? Data spell mistake. DATA data source. That is the reason it is always trying to connect with the HT in memory database. So data source. There is a spell mistake in your URL. So now you guys get to know if is there any spell mistake in properties which you have defined in application.properties. It will misguide you. So it is always trying to connect with HT in memory database because the dependency is available in pom.xml. So now I have removed the dependency from the pom.xml. Let me start the server. Yeah, perfect. Now it is giving something new. So that error is gone. So now what it is saying, root access is denied at root at localhost password. So incorrect credentials. So what it is saying, incorrect credentials. Now let me check what is the credential I have given. Admin. So username and PSSWRT password data source spring. See here also spring. So user it is not taking password. Why? Because it is clearly saying access denied for the user local host. It is not able to recognize the password. Why? Because there is a spell mistake here. You can see spring dot data source. So now we need to correct it whenever some exception comes. So you can see here it is clearly saying access denied for password. So directly you can go to application properties. You can check what is the mistake in password. So my database password is admin only. But what I have done mistake, I have not given property properly. What is the spring dot spring spring? Let me save it. So now let me start the server. Now it should work 100% without H2 in memory database. So now you can see our application is connected with MySQL database. This is how you have to debug, guys. Whenever some exception comes, most of the peoples what they will do, they will not read the error. Without reading the error, they will try to keep on check the code, start the server. Check the code, start the server. It will not help actually. So whenever there is some exception, we should read the error. So my mistake actually earlier, even I also done small mistake. So what I have done, there is a spell mistake in spring dot data source dot password key. So I have given wrong key for to enable the password. So that is the reason it is not getting the password. So now it is able to connect with MySQL database. You got it right successfully. So now let me so go to the server. So we haven't created the table. Let's see whether a table is created or not. So you there is no table here. If you remember in previous class, if you remember when we are working with H2 in-memory database, Hibernate is created table by default, right? So entity JPA is created table for us when we are working with H2 in-memory database. Now in MySQL, Hibernate is not creating the table by default because whenever you are working with relational database, Oracle or MySQL database or MongoDB, any database, Spring Boot by disable that feature. What is that feature? It will not create the table by default. So now we have to enable it. When you are working with MySQL and Oracle or MongoDB, any database, so Hibernate is not going to create the database table by default. So if you want to create Hibernate as if you want JPA to create the table, we have to enable the property. What is that property? Let me write spring dot spring spring dot JPA dot hibernate dot hibernate dot DDL hyphen auto equal create or update. Let me create. So spring.jpa.hibernate.ddl-auto. If you enable this property in application.properties file, you can go and check in your database now. Refresh the repo. You can see now employee table is created by default. You got the point, right? So whenever you are working with Spring Data JPA, with MySQL or Oracle or MongoDB, so Spring Boot by default it will not enable table creation by auto table creation. It will not enable auto table creation feature. So to if you want to create a table by the JDB JPA, so we have to enable this property in application.properties file spring.jpa.hibernate.ddl-auto create. So now this table is created by JPA. So we can continue tomorrow, guys. So it's already 5:12. 6 I think 6:40, right? So we'll connect tomorrow. Okay. So guys, you have to make sure you guys are practicing every day. If you don't practice, you cannot learn anything. So here we have discussed a lot of concept in depth also. Okay, you have to make it note and you have to practice every day. So we can connect tomorrow, guys. Thank you.